The first thing Callum Thorne noticed wasn't the stranger standing inside his cabin. It was the way she was looking at the old photograph hanging above his stone fireplace. Not with simple curiosity. Not the way travelers admired family portraits while waiting for coffee. She studied every face as though she had once known them. Her eyes lingered on one man longer than the others. Callum's older brother, Alden. The brother who had vanished 21 years ago without leaving behind so much as a goodbye. Very few people in Briar Ridge even remembered Alden anymore. Most believed he'd run away. Others whispered he'd been killed somewhere beyond the mountains. Callum had stopped listening years ago. Yet this stranger looked at Alden's face as if she were remembering his voice. When she finally spoke, her words barely rose above a whisper. "May I see it?" Callum's fingers tightened around the black hat he still held. "No." The answer came quickly. Too quickly. The woman lowered her eyes. "I understand." She slipped one trembling hand inside a worn leather document case she'd carried all the way from the stagecoach depot. "Please." Her voice cracked. "Just look." She placed something carefully on the table beneath the photograph. A silver pendant. Old. Worn smooth by decades of use. Broken cleanly down the middle. Callum stared. Then, almost without thinking, he reached beneath his shirt. A chain emerged from beneath his work shirt. Hanging from it was the other half. His heartbeat stumbled. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the evening wind rustled through the cottonwoods. Inside, the entire world seemed to stop. If stories of forgotten families, impossible promises, and second chances are the kind you enjoy settling into, I'd be honored if you stayed with me until the very end. And if this story finds you tonight, let me know where you're listening from. I always enjoy seeing how far these journeys travel. 3 hours earlier, the stagecoach rolled into Briar Ridge beneath a sky painted in autumn gold. Dust drifted behind the wheels before slowly settling over the small Wyoming settlement. The first passenger climbed down, then another. Finally, the last traveler appeared. She couldn't have been older than 29. Her faded blue prairie dress had been mended so neatly that only someone accustomed to hardship would notice the careful stitching. A cream-colored shawl rested around her shoulders despite the mild afternoon. In one hand, she carried a weathered leather document case. In the other, a single carpet bag. Nothing about her suggested wealth. Nothing suggested danger. Yet every head in town slowly turned. Marshal Jed Brewer leaned against the hitching post outside the mercantile. "Haven't seen her before." "No," replied Mrs. Penfield from the bakery window. "Looks educated. Or hiding something." Speculation spread through town before the young woman had even taken 10 steps. She approached the general store first. "Excuse me," she asked gently. "I'm looking for Mr. Callum Thorne." The shopkeeper's smile disappeared. "You family?" "No." "You buying cattle?" "No." "Then why are you looking for him?" She hesitated. "I've traveled a very long way. I need to speak with him." Word traveled faster than horses in Briar Ridge. Within 15 minutes, everyone knew. A mysterious woman had come asking for Callum Thorne. That never happened. Callum avoided visitors. He avoided dances, church socials, town meetings, even celebrations after successful cattle drives. Since Alden disappeared, he had quietly built a life around hard work and silence. People respected him. Few truly knew him. The shopkeeper finally pointed toward the hills. "Last ranch before the ridge." She thanked him, then began walking, nearly 4 miles. Alone. By the time Alohan Vale reached Thorne Ranch, the afternoon sun had begun slipping toward the western mountains. She stopped outside the weathered wooden gate. The ranch wasn't impressive. The fences were well maintained. The barn freshly repaired. Smoke curled from the chimney. Everything reflected one simple truth. Someone lived here with discipline, not comfort. A horse nickered softly from the corral. Moments later, its owner appeared. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark beard trimmed close. Brown coat dusted with dried earth. His sleeves rolled to his forearms. Callum looked at her only once before returning to repairing the saddle resting across the fence. "You lost." "No." "You selling something?" "No." Silence settled between them. Finally she spoke. "My name is Alohan Vale. I've come looking for you." He didn't answer. Instead he picked up his tools. "I'm not buying land. I'm not selling cattle. And I'm not looking for company." She managed a faint smile. "I didn't come for any of those." "Then why are you here?" Her fingers tightened around the leather case. "I brought something that belongs with your family." For the first time, Callum actually looked at her. Not politely. Carefully. "You've got the wrong ranch." I don't. My family doesn't have anyone left. I know. That answer unsettled him. He stood, crossed the yard, stopped several feet away. Who told you about me? A promise. What promise? I'll explain. Not out here. I only need a few minutes. Callum studied her face. She looked exhausted. Her boots carried days of trail dust. One glove had been repaired twice. Whoever she was, she hadn't come comfortably. Still, he couldn't ignore the instinct warning him that strangers rarely arrived carrying good news. I don't know you. I know. You expect me to invite you inside anyway? No. I only hope you'll hear me. The wind lifted a loose strand of her chestnut hair. For one brief moment, Callum saw something unusual. She wasn't afraid. She was carrying grief. There was a difference. He stepped aside. 5 minutes. No more. She nodded gratefully. 5 is enough. The cabin was simple. Everything had its place. A heavy oak table, 2 straight-back chairs, shelves lined with carefully repaired books. A cast-iron stove warming the room. Above the fireplace, one framed family photograph. Eloan stopped walking. Her breathing caught. She stared. There they were. Silas Thorne, his wife Eleanor, young Callum, and beside them, Alden, exactly as she'd imagined after years of restoring faded journal pages and damaged letters. You recognize him? Callum's voice came quietly from behind her. She nodded without taking her eyes off the portrait. Yes. How? She closed her eyes. I was hoping you would ask. She slowly turned. I didn't come here because of your ranch. I came because of him. She looked back toward Alden's face. Callum felt something cold settle in his chest. No stranger should know that name. No stranger should speak about his brother as though she'd known him. He folded his arms. Start talking. Eloan placed the leather document case gently onto the table. I've spent 4 years trying to find you. Why? Because someone trusted me with something that was never meant to disappear. His eyes narrowed. What exactly are you carrying? She rested one hand atop the worn leather case. The truth. Callum stared at her. For the first time in over 2 decades, someone had spoken that word in connection with Alden Thorne. And somehow, he knew his quiet life was about to change forever. Callum didn't touch the leather case. He simply stared at it, then at Eloan, searching her face for even the slightest sign of deception. You've spent 4 years looking for me, he said quietly. That sounds like a long road to tell a lie. I didn't come to convince you, Eloan replied. I came to show you. She slowly opened the weathered case. Inside lay neatly wrapped bundles of old papers, tied with faded blue ribbon, their edges browned by time. Beneath them rested a leather journal, its cover scarred from years of travel. Callum's breath caught. Burned into the leather were 2 initials. A.T. He had carved those initials himself for his older brother when he was barely 12. No, he whispered. He reached for the journal, then stopped. If this is some trick. It isn't. He finally picked it up. The familiar scratches, the worn stitching along the spine, even the tiny knife mark near one corner. He remembered all of it. His brother had carried this journal everywhere. It was found in a locked trunk, Eloan explained, along with letters, surveys, and county records damaged by flooding. I restored them 1 page at a time. Callum opened the journal. The first page contained Alden's unmistakable handwriting. Not a copy, not an imitation. The real thing. His hands trembled. I buried him in my heart 21 years ago. You buried a mystery, Eloan answered softly. Not the truth. The next morning, Callum saddled his horse before sunrise. Without another word, he rode with Eloan into Briar Ridge. Their first stop was the county clerk's office. Edgar Whitcomb had served as county clerk for nearly 30 years. His eyesight had faded. His memory had not. After carefully studying the land deed Eloan unfolded across his desk, he adjusted his spectacles. I haven't seen this seal in years. You recognize it? Callum asked. Whitcomb nodded. It's genuine. Callum frowned. But the signature. Whitcomb pointed toward the bottom of the document. That's your father's handwriting. Callum felt the room tilt. My father died believing Alden disappeared. Whitcomb slowly shook his head. No, this document was signed 5 years after Alden vanished. Silence swallowed the room. 5 years. That meant someone in the Thorne family had known more than they'd admitted. Someone had protected a secret. Callum looked toward Eloan. For the first time, he believed her. Outside, neither of them spoke until they reached the hitching rail. Finally, Callum broke the silence. Who gave you these? Eloan looked toward the distant hills. An elderly woman named Miriam Ashcombe. I've never heard of her. You weren't meant to. She hired me to restore damaged journals. I thought they belonged to an ordinary rancher. She smiled sadly. Then I found your brother's name. Callum listened without interrupting. Miriam refused to explain anything while she lived. Every time I asked, she would only say one sentence. Aloan's voice softened. When the papers can finally breathe again, find Callum Thorne. Before she passed away, she gave me everything. The journals, the deed, the pendant, and one promise. What promise? That I would never let history bury an innocent man. Late that afternoon, they returned to the cabin. Aloan carefully unfolded another document. Not a deed. A hand-drawn survey. Mountains, streams, ridges, hidden trails. At the bottom stood Alden's handwriting. The valley must remain unseen until the right hands find it. Callum studied the map. I've ridden these mountains my whole life. I've never seen this place. You weren't supposed to. She pointed toward an almost invisible trail sketched between two cliffs. It was deliberately omitted from official maps. Why? I don't know. But I believe your brother wanted someone to find it eventually. Someone he trusted. Callum looked toward the window as evening settled over the ranch. If this map is real, it is. Then tomorrow we ride. The journey took most of the following day. The trail narrowed until horses could barely pass. Twice they were forced to dismount. Finally the canyon opened. Before them stretched a quiet green valley hidden behind towering stone walls. Callum stared in disbelief. A weathered cabin stood beside a crystal stream. An old barn leaned against the hillside. Apple trees still grew near the fence. Someone had cared for this place. Not decades ago. Recently. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. Yet fresh hoofprints crossed the soft ground. Callum knelt beside them. They're only a few days old. Aloan's heartbeat quickened. So someone knew this place before us. Callum slowly pushed open the cabin door. Dust floated through shafts of afternoon sunlight. Nothing appeared disturbed, until he noticed one thing. A wooden chair near the fireplace was still warm. He looked back at Aloan. We're not alone. Somewhere beyond the trees, a single horse whinnied. Neither of them had arrived first. And whoever had been protecting Alden's secret for 21 years now knew they had finally found the hidden valley. Callum raised one hand, silently telling Aloan not to move. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Someone had been there only moments before. The chair beside the fireplace still held warmth, and a fresh cup of coffee rested on the table, steam no longer rising but not yet cold. Callum stepped farther inside, his boots creaking against the old wooden floor. Everything else looked untouched. The shelves were neatly arranged. The blankets had been folded. The fireplace had recently been swept. Whoever lived here hadn't abandoned it. They had simply disappeared. Then Aloan noticed another journal resting beneath the window. Unlike the others, this one wasn't hidden. It had been left where someone would immediately find it. Callum carefully opened it. The first page bore Alden's familiar handwriting. If you are reading this, then I prayed long enough for my little brother to find the courage to search beyond what everyone else believed. Callum's hands began to shake. He kept reading. Alden explained that he had never abandoned the family. Years earlier, powerful land speculators had discovered a hidden valley fed by natural springs capable of supplying water to thousands of acres during drought. They intended to seize it by forcing struggling homesteaders from their land. Rather than allow innocent families to lose everything, Alden secretly gathered them and settled them inside the hidden valley, shielding its location from greedy investors. To protect them, he allowed the world to believe he had vanished. If anyone searched for him, they would eventually discover the valley. If no one searched, the people living there would remain safe. Callum lowered the journal. For 21 years, he carried everyone's hatred so others could survive. Aloan nodded silently. He sacrificed his own name. As they searched the cabin, Callum discovered a loose floorboard beneath Alden's bed. Inside lay one final leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope. Across the front were only 4 words. For my brother Callum. He broke the seal with trembling fingers. The letter wasn't about land. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the valley. It was about family. Callum, if this reaches you, it means someone kinder than I ever deserved finished what I could not. I wanted to come home more times than I can count. But every trail leading back to you also led dangerous men toward innocent families. I could live with being called a coward. I could never live with causing their deaths. Tears blurred Callum's vision. Don't remember me as the brother who disappeared. Remember me as the brother who trusted you'd someday understand. For the first time since he was 17 years old, Callum cried openly, not from anger, not from regret, from finally knowing the truth. Eloan quietly stepped outside, giving him the privacy his brother's final words deserved. By morning, they weren't alone anymore. Families began emerging from nearby cabins hidden among the trees. Gray-haired ranchers, young married couples, widows, blacksmiths, teachers, dozens of people. Every one of them greeted Alden's name with quiet respect. An elderly woman smiled through tears. He saved us. Another man nodded, when no one else would. A former schoolteacher added softly, we've waited years, hoping someone from his family would finally come. Callum listened to story after story. Alden had repaired homes, delivered supplies during harsh winters, settled disputes, built irrigation channels, never asking for recognition, never writing home because doing so would have exposed the valley. By noon, Callum realized something extraordinary. His brother hadn't disappeared. He had built an entire community. A week later, trouble arrived. Word spread that investors had uncovered fragments of old county records. Without complete ownership documents, they intended to claim the valley as abandoned land. The community would lose everything. Callum looked toward Eloan. This is why Alden preserved those papers. She nodded, and why Miriam spent years protecting them. Together they carried every journal, survey, and damaged deed back to Briar Ridge. For 3 straight days, Eloan worked without stopping. She carefully matched torn edges, pressed faded pages, restored broken wax seals, compared handwriting, verified survey lines. Every document slowly came back to life beneath her skilled hands. When the county judge reviewed the restored records, silence filled the courtroom. Every signature matched, every survey aligned, every ownership transfer proved legal. The valley had never been abandoned. It belonged to the families Alden had protected all along. The investors quietly withdrew. Justice arrived not through violence, but through truth carefully preserved. Summer returned to the valley. New fences stood where old ones had fallen. Children no longer feared losing their homes. Fields stretched green beneath the Wyoming sun. Callum spent weeks restoring Alden's cabin exactly as his brother had left it. Above the fireplace, he hung the reunited silver pendant inside a small wooden frame. Not as a treasure, as a reminder. Some family bonds survive even decades of silence. Eloan packed her belongings. Her promise had been fulfilled. She had found Callum. She had delivered the truth. There was no reason to stay. She quietly stepped onto the porch before sunrise. I should leave before everyone wakes. Callum appeared behind her. You've already said goodbye to everyone else. She smiled gently. I didn't want goodbyes to become harder. He walked toward her carrying the framed pendant. Without a word, he removed the silver pieces from the frame. Then he fastened the reunited pendant around her neck. She looked down in surprise. It belongs to your family. It does. He smiled. And you're part of it now. Tears filled her eyes. Almost laughing through them, she whispered the same words she'd spoken the day they met. Please, just look. Callum looked. Not at the pendant. Not at the papers. Not at the valley. He looked at the woman who had crossed half the frontier, carrying another family's grief without expecting anything in return. The woman who had restored not only forgotten documents, but a brother's honor, a family's peace, and his own heart. Taking her hand, he smiled. I am, and I don't intend to stop. As the morning sun spilled across the valley, the cabin, the orchards, and the families Alden had once protected, Callum understood that some inheritances were never measured in acres or deeds. The greatest one his brother had left behind was the courage to trust a stranger carrying the truth. And because one woman had whispered, please, just look, a family broken by 21 years of silence finally found its way home.